Hey. Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute. There you go. Hi.
Hi, you look good.
Thanks. I put on a blazer.
Yes, you look so official.
You look nice too.
You haven't let anyone in yet?
No, I was just gonna wait and let you do that. So
Okay.
now and we'll start chatting.
Okay, I'll go ahead. It's not
Okay.
showing me. Normally it's over here for me to do that. That's weird.
Oh, it's on me then. You're not the host. Can I make you the host?
I should be the host. I'm the one who set it up. I don't know why it's.
I'm gonna make you the host. Okay, now you're the host.
Okay. Still not seeing the people to let in. You see my view here. Okay, here we go. All right, you good?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna unmute.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Herbie. We're all on mute, so but feel free to take yourself off mute for a minute to chat.
Couldn't resist.
Yeah.
So many friendly faces. I decided to say hi.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you made it.
So am I. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Like I recognize that gentleman from our.
Where have I seen that guy before?
Yeah, wherever I know that guy from somewhere. That's right.
To say Canada's Most Wanted on the top or something like that.
That was our original headline for the cover, was Canada's Most Wanted chaplain, but then we're like, wait, that doesn't work. Yeah.
Canada's Most Famous Fugitive. No, that's not it. No.
No. It's famous for something. I don't know what it is. Well, I think we had 120 register in advance.
All right.
So we don't usually, lots of people will register and then have other plans or whatnot, but it's a good pre-showing.
14 so far.
Yep.
Well, these are the 14 that need to be here, so it's good.
Yeah, this is the VIP crowd.
There you go.
Well, like all things, most people will come in at 6:59-7:01.
Is Christy going to be joining us at all?
I don't know. I don't think so, but she may.
She's the one that told me about it.
Yeah.
I was hoping,
She was your contact.
Yep.
On our staff.
And where are you located, Jocelyn?
I am in the east end of Toronto.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You mean kind of like where I grew up?
Yeah. Well, probably a little further north because you were in the North Beaches, right? From the story.
I was actually just a good stone's throw from Queen Street East.
Oh, okay. So we're at Greenwood and Danforth.
Oh, goodness me. Wow. Okay. I
Yeah.
know it well. I know it very well. Not too far from Danforth Tech.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice neighborhood. We rent a house here, and unfortunately our landlord is selling our house. So we are, by this time tomorrow night, we may know who is the new owner of the house, and then we
If they would
may
like
know
to
if
stay.
they want us to stay or if they want us to leave. And so, yeah, things are a little uncertain in my home life right now. So
Well,
it's
something to pray about.
let me tell you, it's been a fun week of people coming through our house and having to keep it spotlessly clean and hide all the, your toothbrush. You have to pretend you don't live there for a week while you live there. So it's been a week. But thankfully the showings are done now. So
good stuff.
Yeah, got through that one. So good.
Wait,
Carmen is here. That's great.
you want to turn it down? No, I better make sure I got that off.
Okay. Numbers are coming up now. Okay. Not sure why we're viewing somebody's screen. Are you seeing that too, Sharon?
Someone hijacked our screen.
Yes, I see
Marie,
that, and I'm not sure why.
Marie, I think if you click on stop sharing screen, that might be at the top of your screen. It might say stop sharing. If you can click on that. There we go. Nicely done. Okay, I have 7 o'clock on my computer clock. Does everybody else have, are we on the hour? Shall we begin?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great. So good evening and welcome to Broadview's National Online Reading Club. My name is Jocelyn Bell and I'm the editor and publisher of Broadview. And working behind the scenes, as always, is Sharon Doran, the lovely Sharon Doran, our promotions manager. And we're so glad to see everybody here tonight and that you've taken an hour to spend with us this evening. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, the original owners and custodians of this land. Today, Toronto is home to many, including a diverse urban Indigenous community of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. We would love to know where you're from, so please do say hello from your hometown in the chat space. And if you're part of a faith community and you'd like to add that in as well, please do so. And if you'd like to add in your own land acknowledgement, that would be wonderful as well. It's just great for us to all get to know each other. A few housekeeping notes. We are recording this session, and that's so that we can share the event with others and online. And if you're uncomfortable with your thumbnail video appearing on this recording, then just please turn off your video now. Also, everyone's entered with their audio muted. That's the best way to keep it, just to keep the ambient noises down. We may mute it for you if needed. But do turn on the chat function so that you can see where everybody's from and say hello. And that's also a great place to ask questions. I also recommend that you put your Zoom screen on the speaker view rather than the gallery view. There's a spot in the top right corner to change that on your screen so that you can always see the person who's speaking. So this evening, we're going to hear from Herbie Kuhn, Alanna Mitchell, and John Patterson, and Carmen Lansdowne, all of whom are featured in or contributed to the March 2022 issue of Broadview. One final note before we begin: after our speakers have told us a bit about themselves and their stories, There will be a time to ask questions, and Sharon will put the instructions on how to ask questions in the chat space. I do have some questions ready, but this is really your time, and we will have a much more vibrant conversation if there's lots of participation. So please do ask questions. So let's get started. Herbie Kuhn is a team chaplain for both the Raptors and the Toronto Argonauts, and the public address announcer for the Raptors. He considers his voice a gift from God and shares that gift freely with Raptors fans and players alike. In our March issue, Herbie Kuhn was profiled by Omar Mualim, and he also graced our cover in an amazing photo shoot by Raina and Wilson. Please join me in welcoming Herbie Kuhn.
Good evening, everybody. Jocelyn, thank you so very much. And before I begin with my 5 minutes of fame here, I have to say, watching all of these names and cities and towns pop up in the corner of the chat of my screen, I feel like I'm going on a cross-Canada tour right now. This is awesome. I've seen Port Hope, I've seen Moncton, I've seen places in BC. Oh my goodness, by God's grace, I've had the opportunity to travel to every province over the course of my life. And I feel like I'm going through a whirlwind of memories right now. Listowel, Ontario, there we go. Winnipeg, the Peg. Yes, nothing like hanging out at the corner of Portage, Maine in the middle of February. Praise God. Anyways, it's great to see everybody here. I am overwhelmed by this turnout here tonight. I'm so blessed and so grateful. And to Jocelyn and Christy and Omar and the team from Broadview, listen, cover boy, seriously? I don't get it. I don't get it. Somebody tricked them, or maybe they lost a bet. I don't know how it worked out, but I'm grateful. Very, very grateful. So I've got about 4 or 5 minutes here to share a little bit with you. And this is really what I want to get across. It's so important that when you entrust your dreams and your visions to the Lord, anything is possible. You got to know, I was born and raised in the East End of Toronto. Born and raised on Wheeler Avenue, 6 blocks east of the intersection of Queen and Woodbine, for those of you who are familiar with Toronto's East End, and I know Jocelyn definitely is. And like many a Canadian kid growing up in the 70s, 80s, my dream was to be a professional athlete, was to be an NHL player. I was a goalie, stuck between the pipes, and I love nothing more than stealing someone who thought they had a surefire goal and saying, "Look what I found," and stopping those slap shots. I love that. When it became apparent in my mid-teens or so that the NHL was a bit out of my goaltending reach, then what some people would call a prayer, I would have called it a selfish plea, was, God, I don't know what you're going to do with me. I don't know what I'm going to do for a living when I grow up, but can it please involve professional sports? I was a sports nut. I followed the Argonauts. I followed the Leafs. And then in the 70s, when the Blue Jays came around, I followed the Blue Jays, and so on and so forth. I just love following sports. Every time there was an international match between Canada and anybody, I was all in. And then as life evolved, I went on to high school, graduated from high school, studied theater for a year, dropped out / got kicked out of college, depending on whose opinion you listen to. Went back to the workforce for several years, did reasonably well in the grocery retail business as a 21, 22-year-old as a store manager at a store near Coxwell and Gerrard also in the East End of Toronto. What was a Mr. Grocer at the time? How many of you remember Mr. Grocers? Absolutely. And then I decided I didn't like working for a living, and I wanted to go back to school. And I went back to school, and I went to a school called Vanier College in Montreal, which you can read about in the article. But long story short, it wasn't until I acknowledged that my voice was a gift from the Lord, that's when things really started to turn around. I started announcing for the Raptors in 1995. And I got to tell you all, folks, it was a very selfish ambition. It was a very selfish pursuit. It was all about, how much fame can I have? How many interviews can I do? How many girls can I meet and hang out with? How many parties can I go to? How quickly can I get up to the Hard Rock Cafe up on the street level of Skydome and start partying with players and dancers and stuff after every game? And that was our first season, 1995, 1996, down at the Dome, what is now obviously called Rogers Center. It was on November the 3rd, 1996, when I made my decision to become a Christian, when I received God's lavish offer of grace and forgiveness and salvation. And it was only then, and at that point, I realized that the voice he had given me wasn't only to be self-serving just for me, it was my way of worshiping and repaying him for his goodness to me. So it turned my perspective around. Instead of doing things for me, I started doing things for him, announcing. And then a year and a half later, the opportunity came for the first time to share my faith journey in front of a group of people at a small church, Bayfair Baptist Church in Pickering, Ontario. And since then, God has taken my life and done incredible things with it. But you know what the really peculiar part is? The kid who grew up in the beach, whose dream was to be involved in professional sports rather, but was never good enough to play any professional sports. Once I surrendered my dreams to the Lord, he took it, he added to it. And not only has he added to it, he's allowed me to not only be involved in professional sports in one team or two sports, but in multiple sorts as well. And I get to use my gift, my voice, as worship back to him. So I sit here tonight looking at all of your amazing faces out here, somehow fooled enough people to get on the cover of this incredible magazine. And all I can say is all glory to God, plain and simple. Because of Jesus, I am here. And for those of you, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 70s, or 80s, and you're still wondering what you're going to do when you're going to grow up, all I got to say is this: what are you good at? What is the unique thing that God has blessed you at? Turn it over to him. Say, Lord, how can I honor you with this gift? And then watch out. He will help. Psalm 37:4 says that delight yourselves in the ways of the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Delight yourself in the ways of the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Once I delighted in him for this voice, he gave me the desires of my heart. And now I'm involved with the Argonauts, the Raptors, Athletics Canada, and I get to be a police chaplain too. And I have 3 championship rings as well. So praise God. 6 minutes and 5 seconds, Jocelyn. There you go. I'm done. Bye.
Thank you so much, Herbie. That was a lot of energy brought to the start of our program tonight. And you timed it. Wow.
Yep,
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. You're a pro. Okay. There must be some questions from the audience. I'm going to give you a few moments to, somebody would like you to repeat the scripture reference. What was the scripture reference?
Psalm 37:4.
Psalm 37:4.
I'm
Okay.
gonna look it up right now. Yep. I'm gonna make sure I've got that 100% correct. Keep going. Next question. I'm good.
Okay,
I can
Herbie.
multitask. Yes.
Go ahead.
I grew up on Winneva Avenue in the beaches.
What? 2 blocks
Yes.
over.
Yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
But I'm a little older than you. I grew up there from 43 to 53.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that was a couple of years before my time. Absolutely.
Yeah, before I moved.
So
to
for those of you who aren't familiar, there's Wheeler Avenue. Then the next street over is Lee, then Hambly, and then Winneva. And if you go to the top of Winneva, Williamson Road Public School.
Public school.
That was my school from junior kindergarten through to grade 6. How about you?
Me too. Kindergarten
You too?
to grade 3. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, we've got a couple of Williamson Road alumni here. I love it. I wasn't expecting that. Yes, It is Psalm 37:4. Psalm 37:4 says, take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. That's the New International Version translation.
Lovely. Okay, we've got Hazel Ward would like to ask a question.
What's up, Hazel?
I would like to ask about being a chaplain for a sports team. Like, I know military chaplains, they're dealing with people who are in danger, statistically more than sports people are. And
Yeah.
as a student chaplain is dealing with kids, young people who may be homesick, and overwhelming and so on. So what would you say it's like being a chaplain for a sports team, and what are the things that they are looking for?
First of all, what it's like, Hazel, is it's an incredible privilege. And the thing I love about it is I'm not a 9-to-5 sit at a desk kind of guy. I would go absolutely nuts if someone had made me do that. I'm the kind of guy that needs to be out and about interacting with individuals, bit of a change of scenery every day if possible. So being a sports chaplain is awesome. One of the reasons is because no day is exactly the same as it was the day before. In terms of what makes it unique, being a chaplain to professional athletes, theirs is a calling of a very transient nature. For the most part, when you're dealing with military or if you're a hospital chaplain, the best way I can describe this is sports careers are very short. Sports careers are very short. The average length of a career for an NFL player, for example, is about 3.5 years. CFL, it's about the same. For basketball, it's a bit longer because it's not as much of a toll on your body, but it's still a very short time. I think it's maybe 4.7 years, something like that. track athletes, because they don't get tackled every 5 minutes, it can be a little bit longer if their bodies hold up. And the number one thing that I deal with, Hazel, and to your point about, youth who may be homesick or military who are in danger, is identity. I deal with a lot of individuals who grew up in their sports teams in their communities, in their high schools, in their colleges. They were the man. That was the go-to player, right? The woman who was in the starting lineup all the time. Then all of a sudden they show up in the pros and it's like, they're just one of a number. And sometimes their number doesn't get called. Sometimes they get benched, or sometimes they get a season-ending injury. And where's my identity now if I can't contribute? Where's my identity if my stat line isn't as good as I wanted it to be? And that's where Christ comes into the equation. When your identity is based on yourself as a daughter or a child of the Most High God, not in the crest that is on your chest or the name that's on your back necessarily, it revolutionizes everything. And when you tell them you're not playing for the fans, you're not playing for the media, you're playing for the Lord and for the family who sacrificed to put you there, it releases a lot of pressure. That's the number one thing that I deal with. And of course, there are also career-ending injuries sometimes, season-ending injuries, and of course, deaths and things that happen within the context of a season to family members who you are there to serve and assist them through those challenging times. Fantastic question, Hazel. Appreciate that.
Are you Drake's chaplain as well? Out of curiosity?
Oh, I've tried. I've had numerous conversations with Drake. I don't know if anybody here knows who Lecrae is. Lecrae is a Christian hip hop rap guy, and I handed him one of his CDs, and I said, "Listen to this, and let me know what you think of it." He's never told me, so but I still get to chat with him every now and then. Yeah, we'll see what happens one day.
Okay, you've got lots of great compliments about your energy and how you're even more exciting than the article itself, which isn't surprising in person, in the flesh. Somebody would like to know if you think the Leafs are ever going to win the Stanley Cup again. Care to comment?
Yes, they will.
Someday they will. We'll have both.
Someday they will. I'll just say this, Jocelyn. The Leafs' last Stanley Cup win was in 1967, and I was born in 1969. That's all I got to say.
Okay.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for that parade.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm still waiting for that parade. Yeah.
Okay, and Catherine has a question.
Yeah. Hi. How do you shape your ministry to players who are not already people of faith? And do you find that you have, that people, players who aren't people of faith reach out to you for guidance? And are their questions different? How do you handle them when you're not starting from an agreed upon position of a Christian faith?
Catherine, thank you for that question. So to answer that question, for me, the foundation of chaplaincy is consistency. The foundation of a successful chaplaincy endeavor is consistency, being there, showing up day in and day out. My approach is not necessarily spiritually assaulting an individual the moment that I meet them. Hey, what do you think about the Lord? Hey, hey, what's going on? Where are you from? How long have you been playing football for? How long have you been running track for? Find out about their family. Find some common ground to work on. They all know who I am. They all know that I'm the chaplain. And I would say it's a very small percentage, probably less than 10%, maybe even less than 5%, that have no faith background at all. Most have at least some have faith as part of a nominal portion of their upbringing. And then maybe they wandered away from it per se. But it's very rare that I interact with anybody who's an atheist, for example. I've had a couple to deal with over the years. You know what? I serve everybody. Jesus Christ came to serve everyone, regardless of whether they were excited about him or not, right? So that's what I'm there to do. So whether it's picking up the case of 6 Gatorade bottles and running it out onto the field, whether it's handing a guy a towel, whether it's leading a Bible study, anything in between, that's what I'm there to do. I serve. And that in turn, that consistency helps to facilitate conversations. And in particular, when guys are going through tough times and you've been there day in and day out, they don't like to meet a stranger for the first time and pour out their heart to them. They want to pour out their heart to someone who they're familiar with. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had players, Catherine, who have never set a single foot in a Bible study, never set foot in a pregame chapel, who all of a sudden something happens and it's, hey, Herb, you got a second after practice? I need to talk. Yeah, I'm there for you, bro. I'm there for you. It's incredible. I love it. This is the same thing with the hospital chaplain. You're there. You show up, regardless of whether they want you there or not. Great question. I'm loving this, Jocelyn. You sure we can't do this for a whole hour?
Sure.
I know there are
sure
other
we could.
guests.
We have other guests, but I'm sure we could. I just have a question myself, and that is, we always hear about athletes thanking God for the win, and I wonder if do you pray for wins, or do you just no? Okay.
Nope. Great story for you. Ready for this?
Yes.
Grey Cup in 2010 was in Vancouver, in BC, and on one of the teams it was Winnipeg versus BC, and on one of the teams was Enoch Mwamba, and on the other team was Couchy Mwamba, two brothers, either one playing for either team. Mom shows up at the game. Mrs. Mwamba shows up at the game, and she has taken the jersey from each team, literally took scissors and split it down the middle and sewn the two halves together. So she walks out there with the Winnipeg jersey on one side, the BC jersey on the other side, with Mwamba across the back. The moral of the story is this: God's got kids on both teams. And I don't think he's necessarily interested in who's winning or losing. He may use that for his glory. I'm not that much of a theologian. That's a different pay grade for me, okay? But I think he's more interested with how the individuals handle the winning and the losing, how they process that. Do they handle it in using the fruits of the spirit, for example, or are they bitter and selfish and ready to point the finger at the ref for ruining their whole experience, and so on and so forth? I think God's more interested in our reaction to what happens on the field rather than the outcome of the game.
Okay, well said.
Thank you. And so that was a long answer to no, I do not pray for wins and losses.
Alan Hooks has a question. Do you belong to a group of chaplains?
Yes. Here we go. Athletes in Action is part of Power to Change Ministries. Some of you on this screen, I'm gathering from the hair color, may remember a group called Campus Crusade for Christ Canada from back in the day. Yep, I see a whole lot of heads nodding. Fantastic. Campus Crusade for Christ Canada in 2011 changed its name to P2C, Power to Change Ministries. And Athletes in Action is one of a dozen ministries that operate under the umbrella of Power to Change Ministries Canada. And their headquarters, or our headquarters, I guess you could say, for P2C is in Langley, BC. But for Athletes in Action, we have about 70 staff across the country who serve in varsity ministry on university campuses, touring teams, engaging different cultures through sport. There's one more. I'll remember it in a second. And the pro ministry, that's us. So there's a group of about 10 or 11 chaplains who serve in the pro ministry. That's Athletes in Action. And I can't believe I can't remember the fourth one right off the top of my head.
It'll come to you. You can put it in the chat.
I've only been working for it for 16 years. Jeez Louise.
Dave Noppert has a question.
Dave.
Hi, Herbie. I have a question. What about, do you speak to kids, young kids, who may not necessarily be athletes, or just the general kids? And what I'm thinking about here is the kids who are in the cycle of poverty, and we see what happens. And I think we're going to hear from another speaker, with all the opioid crisis, but even the poverty cycle goes on. And your message and your enthusiasm and everything, it could only be helpful to those kids. Do you do that, or you see it that as another avenue, or do you have time?
So first of all, Dave, yes, I do that. Yes, I have done many, whether you want to call them motivational talks or inspirational talks, to middle school. Middle school is my sweet spot. Grade 7 and 8s. I really love speaking to those youth. You can speak to elementary school kids to encourage them. The level of grasping isn't quite as strong, I find. So yes, that is something I would still consider doing more of, although I must confess right now, the schedule's pulled pretty tight right now. I serve with 3 different teams and a police service. So, and I have my own family as well. So, but thank you though. Yep.
I think we're going to have to leave it there, Herbie. That was so wonderful. And we're going to go on to our next speaker.
Awesome.
And more passionate people on the way about what they do. And so we will keep it going. So next up, we have Alanna Mitchell and John Patterson, and they're going to do a duo which we've never tried before on the Reading Club, but I think it will be just fine. So Alanna Mitchell is known to many of you. She's been writing for us for years. She's a journalist, an author, and a playwright based in Toronto. In 2014, she turned her second book, Seasick, The Global Ocean in Crisis, into a one-woman play, which she performs around the world and is going to be performing at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. soon. This is Alanna's third appearance at a Broadview online reading club, and we're so glad to have her back. John Patterson is Alanna's brother-in-law, and John has enjoyed a long and successful career as both an entrepreneur and a community developer. He was a co-founder of the Chicago-based Can-Bay group of companies, which by the time he retired in 2004, had grown to employ 7,000 employees worldwide. He has lived and worked in India, the UK, the US, and Hong Kong. And in 2004, John and his family returned to Canada and established Abbey North in the Haliburton Highlands of Ontario, where they host and lead small retreats and planning sessions for aspects of work they deem important in the world today. In our March issue, Alanna wrote about an innovative Japanese method that can grow mature forests 10 times faster than usual. And she brought the story home with John's effort toward growing a Miyawaki forest. Please join me in welcoming Alanna and John.
Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi.
Thanks for that introduction. I guess I'll start off, John, if you don't mind. Now, I don't think I can possibly compete with Herbie and sports teams and that kind of performance is amazing. So I'll just kind of let you know that my passion is more about how the world works and how biology works and how systems work and how people fit into that, of course. So I became fascinated a little while ago with how our understanding of trees has changed, has shifted and evolved over time since maybe the 50s. And I was trying to figure out how to write that for Jocelyn, and I had dinner with John, of course, as you know, and so of course the story, as so many things, started with John, my husband's brother, John Patterson. So John showed me some pictures. He'd been to a forest that he had planted when he was just a small child, 12 years old, and he hadn't been able to go into the forest. This was last summer because of all the mosquitoes. But he showed me these pictures from a bit of a distance, this forest, and I got to thinking about what that kind of a forest that we used to plant in plantations and rows meant and what it symbolized about how we think about this stuff. And then he was telling me about the Miyawaki forest that he's planting on his Abbey Gardens property in Haliburton. And so that became the sort of the shape of the story, and the intellectual sort of the academic, let's say, heft of it was to talk with this brilliant woman named Suzanne Simard, who is a forest ecologist based in Vancouver, who grew up in the forests, the interior forests of BC, and saw everything working together, and then trying to figure out why those systems work together. And so she's just a leader in the world on this kind of stuff. So John, let me pass it over to you.
Myself. There we go. Thanks, Alanna, very much. And thank you, Broadview Magazine, for this invitation. We love to tell the story of Abbey Gardens and our trees. It's a bit of a truism, in fact, to say that our planet suffers from overuse and abuse by the human race. One of the unfortunate contradictions is the importance of gravel pits for all of us. I mean, we love our roads, we need gravel pits. We love to build buildings and we need cement, and therefore we need sand and gravel. And yet those gravel pits serve us, but they leave one ugly scar on this face of the planet. When my wife Taya and I retired after 35 years of work abroad, we came back about the turn of the century or so. One of our focuses became work on the environment. We chose an old disused gravel pit and near our home in Haliburton, Ontario. And we bought it up and we proceeded to turn it into something useful and beautiful for the community. It's about 380 acres in size. Vegetable gardens and a brewery and solar and wind operations, ponies and chickens and bees, a shop for selling healthy produce, produced in our gardens and other food products, and even a retreat center for caring for cancer patients. All of these items occupy the 380 acres. But in addition to that, there's a lot of open space that used to be gravel pit and is no longer used in that fashion. And so we've been working on the regeneration of the soil, and more recently with this Miyawaki project, we're planting trees very, very close together. We only chose a small plot, but you plant the trees in the Miyawaki approach. You choose local species and then mix them all together in very, very contained spaces. And we don't know how this works yet, because we just did it last September. We did the planting last September. And so come June, we will know whether or not this approach works. In the meantime, we're working on formulating ways to restore the soil through the whole pit area. And hopefully then there'll be a possibility of growing more trees and also other plants. Where once there were stones and sand, we intend there to be rich soil and growing capacity so that more trees and edibles can be grown. We'd like there to be a model developed here in Halliburton. We'd like there to be a model developed and documented such that other people could replicate this approach elsewhere, because everywhere you go, there's used up old gravel pits sitting as scars on the land. So there's room for thousands of trees in our 380 acres, and for an even larger vegetable garden than what we have already, perhaps even some more bees and some more orchard. But we're particularly interested in whether or not we can have these forests, as per Professor Miyawaki, whether or not these forests will actually do what they're supposed to do, which is grow dramatically fast. And as we all understand, fast growing trees is a very good thing for all of us. That's all I want to say right now. And I thank Herbie for getting the fires lit. There's a Maple Leafs game going on as we speak. I can't imagine that Herbie's still on the screen.
Oh, he
Anyway,
is. He's here.
Here
I'm
we
here, John.
are.
I'm here.
And we're delighted to have the opportunity to chat a bit about this approach to dealing with our environmental challenges.
Great. Thank you so much, John and Alanna. So we have a few comments. They're not questions, but just some comments that you can read. But there is a question. Oh, there's questions coming in. I lost track of it moved on me. Dave Noppert, I think, has directly messaged me first. So I'm going to let Dave go first. Oh, you're still on mute, Dave.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask, that's fantastic. I just wondered at the beginning, did you get politicians to buy into this, or how did you work with your politicians to get them on board? Because presumably and hopefully they are on board.
Yes, very much so. And we have several of them who volunteer with us at Abbey Gardens, because we have some employed staff, young folk who are running the place. But we also really are very, very dependent on volunteers. We've got several politicians who are involved with that, with their families, in the work that we're doing at Abbey Gardens. There's a lot of work, you know. Gardening is no joke. It's a lot of work if you're gonna grow nice vegetables and build up the soil and so on. And also we've got the bees that have to be careful. I mean, lots of things. And we depend very heavily on our volunteer corps, and politicians are amongst them. And that's local politicians. We've had visits from the provincial and the federal politicians that represent us, but those are come and go visits. They come and present a check for helping us with this or that, and then they're off again. But the local politicians are very much involved with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we've got Ray LeBeau, and he says, can either speaker comment on the balance between forests, trees, and the delicate environment?
I can deal with that, but what can you give me a little more detail on that, maybe, Ray? The delicate balance. I mean, maybe what you're talking about is the fact that, you know, forests and trees and plants help to heal the planet. Actually, they actually help to restore it to its health. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, can I be heard now?
Yep, we can hear you.
I saw a recent article on news. They were talking about clear cutting and how it's having a major impact on, you know, these fires, these floods, and you know, the more clear cutting to do, and because the balance is becoming more favored towards these very damaging events, weather events, and I'm just wondering, when you're planting or doing this regeneration of the soil and the restoration, are you giving consideration to that you are healing the planet in some way?
This is John. I turn it over to you, John. Unmute yourself.
Muted, John.
Go ahead. What were you going to say, Alanna?
I was just going to say, I think you should talk about this one because you were very, very intentional about the types of things that you planted in that Miyawaki garden. It was a whole research project. Yeah.
Yeah, the Miyawaki forest instructions that we found and that we learned from our friends in India was that you choose locally plants of trees that are locally there anyway in other forests in the area. These are the local trees, and you plant them extremely close together because the root systems feed each other. They help each other grow, and they share various chemicals that the others need. And so we've been very, very careful about that. Frankly, when I was 12 years old and we grew we planted the other forest, I wasn't very articulate about things. Not that I'm much more articulate now, but the original forest, I think we only planted 3 or 4 varieties back, and that was near Lakefield. If some of you know where Lakefield is, that was on a farm near Lakefield, and we just chose. We were sent plants by the Department of Lands and Forests, as it was then known, and we opened up the box and put them in the ground. Is what we did, but yes, the varieties of trees are important when you're using the Miyawaki approach, and clear cutting of forests is hopefully going to become a thing of the past. It's just not a helpful approach. And if you have to cut some trees, you cut some trees, but leave like 2/3 of the trees still standing so that they can reproduce and grow like that. I mean, it would be my layman's suggestion.
You know, if you're Suzanne Simard, what you also talk about is that you need the mycorrhiza, so the little threads that connect in the soil among the trees, and this is what's so fascinating about her work, is that she talks about how trees actually share resources. She calls them a society, and they actually have what we might even call a moral structure in their sharing. And so I find that really fascinating. And one of the things they talk about with the Miyawaki forest is just to put a teaspoon or two, even just a teaspoon or two of the original soil from the forest to help that system build in the new forest that you're putting together. Fascinating idea.
Okay, John, can you give us a quick rundown of which species you're planting? That's from Mary Margaret Boone.
Yes, I could, if my memory were stronger. We're doing 2 or 3 varieties of maples, and we're doing ash trees. We're doing mainly it's deciduous trees and not too much on the softwood. But what else? what other varieties? Oh yeah, there were some oak trees and various kinds of shrubs we planted also in this small forest. This forest that we're talking about is only 1,000 square feet, and we had 2 plots of 1,000 square feet, and each of them, then we put lines across so that here was a square meter, and here was a square meter, another square meter, and then in each of those squares we planted a whole variety of 7 or 8 varieties within each of those squares. And then the second 1,000 square feet was being developed by scientists from the Trent University, and they had a great time. They came up with a team of about 8 people and planted very similar trees to what we were planting, but they did a few other things also to the soil before they got started. We have a thing called Halliburton Forest, which is a commercial operation just north of us, and they have developed biochar, which is a burning of waste wood products without oxygen in the burning process, and so you end up with a black powder, which is just amazing stuff apparently. And so we added a whole lot of that to our lot too, as we were planting these trees.
We have 1 more minute for this segment, and I got a direct message from Herbie for a question for John. So go ahead, Herbie.
John, you were 12 years old when you and your father planted that forest near Fenland Falls at your uncle's place. And then for over decades, it slipped from your memory. When you were there this past September, watching your nieces and nephews and family members work around that area, what were your emotions like, sir?
I was extremely touched. I mean, literally, I was in tears when I was at the old forest from 65 years ago. Yeah. It was just it was wondrous to see these tall trees now thriving and babies of them growing up also in the same area. The area had not been touched by the farm family that owns it. They had just left it all these years. They didn't use it for anything. They didn't cut down trees or anything. And so it was a very wild kind of looking forest, but just, you can imagine how beautiful it felt to be there after all these years and traveling all over the world. And all of a sudden you come back and there's this forest that is the result of some youthful enthusiasm years ago. It was just an amazing moment.
Fantastic. Thank you. It's amazing what wonderful things can happen when humans don't get in the way. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, John and Alanna. That's fantastic. There's so many other questions here that we're not going to have time to get to at this moment, but if you either want to respond in the chat, or if you're able to stay after for a few minutes, people are free to stick around. We often chat for as long as half an hour or so after the close of the event. So perhaps you can stick around and take a few more questions.
Can I just say one other thing, Jocelyn?
Of course, yeah.
One of the things that we do that I didn't mention in my opening comments is that whenever there are school holidays, we do children's programs at Abbey Gardens. And one of the things they do is go visit these trees that have just been planted. But they are there to learn about nature. And they take a day or 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, depending on the length of the holidays. In the summertime, we have summer camp programs. And kids that have come up from the city show up at Abbey Gardens to learn about nature. And I just love it. That's the other thing that brings tears to my eyes very quickly, Herbie, is the little kids out, patting the ponies and squawking with the chickens.
That's beautiful. Thank you, John. Okay, so we are going to move along to Carmen Lansdowne. Reverend Carmen Lansdowne is the Executive Director of First United, an outreach mission in Vancouver's downtown east side. She is a member of the Haltsuk First Nation, and she is a nominee for the United Church's next moderator. And so far, she's actually the only nominee who's come forward. In our March issue, Nancy Painter wrote a feature about Carmen Lansdowne and her spiritual leadership team and their effort to center the spiritual needs of Indigenous people at First United. Please join me in welcoming Carmen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for the invitation. I'm joining from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh here in the downtown east side of Vancouver. You may hear there's a lot of sirens outside right now. So we are also sort of one of the epicenters for the overdose crisis and the drug toxicity poisoning crisis here in Canada. And it's a real pleasure to join you tonight. My parents were married at First United Church in 1975. And as an Indigenous woman, as the first director of Native Ministries for BC Conference, my mom sort of raised me to believe that unless we were doing ministry with integrity for society's most marginalized, we weren't doing it with integrity anywhere. And so I grew up very privileged in a upper middle class income neighborhood in Victoria, but never remember a time in my life where my parents weren't focused on the ministry of First United. And like a lot of Indigenous youth, I really struggled, especially once I got out of high school. I struggled in university. It took me until my second year of my MDiv program at the Vancouver School of Theology until I realized that I'd been suffering from culture shock in school, that the way that I thought about the world was different. The way that I understood culture and the world around me was different, and the way that I experienced education was different. I took a class on Aboriginal and Western thought with Dr. Martin Brokenleg as part of my preparation for ministry, and I thought, oh, that's why I feel so weird all the time. I felt a call to teaching theology, actually, and so I went on to do a Master's of Theology and a PhD. I did my Master's of Theology at Vancouver School of Theology and my PhD at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. And I really, in my doctoral dissertation, I looked at the ways that, one, the personal question I was trying to answer is, given the history of residential schools, given the complicity of the church in the colonization of North America and Canada specifically, how can I still be Indigenous and Christian? But the second thing is, what does the Indigenous community have to offer back to the church? And so if we could look at the ways in which Indigenous communities and sort of the Euro-Christian tradition of Western settlement of North America were different, what are the pieces of wisdom from what our worldviews were like before that could sort of reshape the church to be life-giving to all different people? And I think that's really shaped the way that we approach ministry at First United since I started here. As Nancy mentioned in the article about us, we are all three of the, we have 6 or 7 people on our leadership team at any given time over the last 5 years, but in terms of the ministry at First United, it's me and Dr. Cheryl Bear from the Nadle-Wet'en First Nation, and then Lauren Sanders, who's a chaplain. She's African-American and Kickapoo and Potawatomi from Kansas and Mississippi. And I think we may be unique in that we are the only ministry of the United Church of Canada that has 3 Indigenous women in leadership in our ministry. And so I think that's really important, especially given murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, especially given how many murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls have gone missing from this community that we serve, and the fact that we have such a high percentage of deeply impoverished Indigenous urban people in this neighborhood. If you think of our social safety nets and the things that we value as Canadians more broadly around income assistance and the housing affordability, good medical care, supports for people with disabilities, and you think of what it means to be marginalized, I can't think of a person who might be more marginalized in Canada than an urban, displaced Indigenous woman who's got a co-occurrence of mental illness and addiction, who is a subsistence street worker who was homeless, right? And so our approach is really like, unless we design the support and social safety nets that would support her, you will always have people who fall through the cracks of our systems and processes that we have. And so we're really, I read a great meme on the internet a couple of years ago that's really shaped how we do our work. It's very common across the country in United Churches to have, these bold pronouncements, often on a banner that say all are welcome here. And I saw something once that said there's a big difference between saying all are welcome here and this was designed with you in mind, right? Like that this space, this ministry, these services have been designed with the people that we serve in mind. And I think that really gets at the heart of our affirming ministries in the United Church of Canada, of like really exploring what does it mean to be welcome, not welcome to be like me, but welcome just as you are. And that I've thought about who you are and made this space a place that can include you without you having to ask. So that's sort of what we're all about here at First United. My leadership in the church actually started as like a youth rep at Presbytery, and then at Youth Forum, or BC Conference Youth, and then Youth Forum at the General Council, and then I was a member of the executive and central committees of the World Council of Churches, and a member of General Council Executive. And so my leadership in the church has also involved all of this involvement in the sort of governance of the church. And I think the type of turnaround that I've affected at First United is part of the reason why the region here asked me if I would consider letting my name stand for moderator. It's a little bit disconcerting to be the only one so far, especially since the opening motions have started, right? Like we've had our initial session of General Council 44. It's the first time ever we're meeting over a 6-month period, just virtually. Normally we would all be together for a 1-week period. The election would be Friday night, installation would be Sunday morning, and boom, we're done. And so to have had General Council start and the nominations process be open until the end of May for the regions, and until the middle of June from the floor of General Council, from the virtual floor of General Council, feels a little bit odd. But, I keep saying that I'm also still in discernment, right? If there's anything that indicates between now and, especially between now and the end of April, before the regions start meeting, that I hope that I would have the integrity to step back and say, like, this is not the right time, or it's not the right role for me or for the church. And so I'm looking forward to getting into the listening sessions this week and to hear what are the hopes and dreams of the wider church, and what are the pain points of the wider church, and see if I might be able to offer some leadership.
Well, I think we all will agree that you could certainly offer some wonderful leadership, and so we wish you the best. Thank you for that, and yeah, really interesting summary. You've got so much going on. My gosh. So we've got Ray LeBeau. That's a long one. I'll just read it, I guess. The Very Reverend Stan McKay made history as the first Aboriginal person to lead the United Church of Canada, serving as moderator from 92 to 94. He was instrumental in pioneering a new road toward reconciliation. He's just wishing you much success in your endeavor. Do you know Stan McKay?
Oh, I have muted myself. Yes, I do. I've known Stan since I was a little girl, because my mom was director of Native Ministries in BC, and was involved in the national consultations that were happening in the late 70s and early 80s across the country. My first time to Manitoba actually was, gosh, I don't remember how old I was, like 7 or 8. We went in May. It was 27 degrees. I was outside in my blue polka dot sundress that I was so proud of, playing in Stan's backyard. And I went inside to the church for lunch, and I came outside and there was a foot of snow. And our bus had hit a frost boil. And it was my first time ever seeing fork lightning. So those are all of the memories I have of my first time meeting Stan. But I was actually at Youth Forum in 1992 when he was elected too. So
wow.
I've known Stan a long time.
So quick follow, what did it mean to you as a young Indigenous person to see an Indigenous person in leadership in that role?
Yeah, thank you. Stan's continued to be a really strong elder and presence and quite gentle, quiet person, and so thoughtful. And he actually, I was in Manitoba for a board meeting of the Sandy Social Center when I received a text message asking me if I would consider letting my name stand. And instead of going for breakfast with Geraldine Bjornson, who's a retired United Church minister, who's retired to Winnipeg, I called Stan and I was like, Stan, I was going to ask you if we could Zoom, but I'm 2 hours from your house. Can I just come have lunch with you tomorrow morning? And so I drove up to Fisher River the next morning and sat and discerned with him about, that external call that came.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary Margaret Boone has a question.
Hi, Carmen, I wish you all the best in your endeavor. I've read about you since I saw your name being put forward. And actually, my first thought was, how do you think it will be different in terms of what Canada has seen? And it's not the beginning, but I think the wake-up call was the 215 unmarked graves that were discovered at Kamloops. How do you think then it will be different in dealing with truth and reconciliation and getting people to be more involved with our Indigenous neighbors and friends in the church? How do you think that will be different now?
I'm not sure that it will be different. I think there will always be resistance to talking about that history because so many Canadians still see it as history, right? Not as intergenerationally linked to our existence as Indigenous peoples in Canada now, or who don't see the way that systemic racism still functions and is very alive and well, and how the country thrives on that institutionalized racism. So I don't have a lot of hope that it will be that different. And I also know, because I think really Canada has not grappled with truly how racist it is. Like, not just against Indigenous people, but anti-Black racism, anti-immigrant racism, and it's largely like systemic racism set up by like very polite, well-meaning, well-intentioned people, right? So the fact that we don't recognize the graduate degrees of people that are educated in a Commonwealth country in like India or Pakistan, and yet they come here being actively told by immigration experts that they can become a lawyer or a judge or a doctor here, and then get told once they've spent their life savings to get here that, oh, but you have to go back to finish your GED first.
Wow.
So I think there are we have a huge reckoning to do about racism more broadly, and I think that Kamloops was a catalyst and will continue to be a catalyst because there's something so much more tangible about unmarked graves. And the thing that brings me hope is statistics, commission reports, TRC reports. They're not tangible and they don't evoke an emotional response that's required for people to change their minds, to repent, to turn around. And I think that the amount of stories that are coming out of Indigenous Canada, the fiction, the poetry, the TV shows, the movies, like all of those things are, while they may not be 100% like historically accurate from an objective point of view, they're eliciting the connection between that painful history and the painful present of being Indigenous in Canada. And that part gives me hope because there's so much Indigenous culture of that's forcing people to reimagine not this romanticized idea of what it means to be Indigenous in Canada, but like, life in the city of Dirty Water or Five Little Indians. And, like there's great resources for people to draw on in a way that I think is making emotional connection.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from Carol Scott, who's asking if you can speak to the fact that the United Church has taken so long to respond to the TRC calls to action to the churches. Also, she says she loves the focus on what do Indigenous peoples have to offer back to the church.
Carol, I mean, I think in some ways, every sector of Canadian society has been slow to respond to the calls to action, and the United Church has also led on some of the calls to action. And we, I think a thing we don't talk about enough is the fact that we took a very unique approach in the original residential school cases, right? Like, we pled guilty and waived our right to insurance. And, this is a really interesting conversation when we look at the current financial struggles of the church. Like that, along with like people's punitive cessation of their giving to mission and service after 1988 and the decision to become inclusive of other sexual orientations, it sort of happened around the same time as the original residential school cases started. So we started having to pay huge settlements before we negotiated with the government about getting some of that money back. And there were people who were saying, like, I don't think that the church should be inclusive to gays and lesbians, that stopped giving to the church. But that was a really bold move, because unlike the other Canadian denominations that operated residential schools, we had to self-fund our liability for the original cases that were coming before the class action lawsuits happened and before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the comprehensive claim settlement happened. And the way that we were present to that admitted liability, but also we maintained a presence where we were interveners on cases in important ways where we could be held accountable for that history. And so we didn't just say, okay, yes, we're guilty and we're going to back away. We participated at every step through the legal process. I know it wasn't the same across every part of the country, but Chief Robert Joseph, who's become an important ambassador for reconciliation in Canada, is from here in BC, and he came to BC conference before the hearings were here, and he went to the Archdiocese of New Westminster and to the Archdiocese of Vancouver for the Roman Catholic and the Anglican churches, and said, my biggest fear is that no one will come. Like, this hearing is for everybody, and non-Indigenous people have to come and witness to the testimony that's happening in the TRC. And in British Columbia, we did. Like, so many non-Indigenous people came to those hearings and were moved. And I think, I don't know what it's like across the rest of Canada, but I was, my puppy's like, it's time to go home now. But here, like, I was living in California doing my PhD at the time, and I came home to a drastically different Canada and a drastically different church. Like, so many congregations here have reconciliation matters committees, are doing things to educate themselves, or looking at the calls to action to say, like, what can my community of faith do differently? And so it might seem like it's not, the needle hasn't moved, but for me it has, and my experience of being Indigenous in the church has. Now I feel like the fact that I'm Heiltsuk and an ordained minister and theologian is something that's celebrated, whereas before it was kind of, I don't know, not celebrated, but I was sort of like set aside as some kind of exception or novelty or something like that. But I don't know. I see us, there are ways other denominations are leading on some pieces, but I think that we're leading on others. And I don't, it's going to take a long time to undo 500 years of history. And I think we need to be gentle and gracious with ourselves, because when we're not and we get defensive, then we lose our creativity about how to do things differently.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmen. I'm just mindful of the time. I know some people will want to get going, but if you can stay after, if all the guests are able to stay for a few minutes after and chat some more informal time, that would be lovely. But I just wanted to thank you all so much for being here tonight. Herbie, Alanna, John, and Carmen, you volunteered your time to make this event possible, and I'm so grateful to you. So tomorrow we'll be sending a short survey by email to everyone who was here tonight about this event. The Reading Club is a free event, but it does cost us $2,700 per year for the Zoom plan that can handle a group of this size. So if you're already a donor to Broadview, thank you so much. Your donations help us continue to feature exceptional people And if you're not a donor, please consider making a small donation for tonight's event. Sharon will post a link, if she already has, to donations in the chat. And we'll also send that link out again with tomorrow's survey. There are Broadview reading clubs across Canada, and if you're interested in joining a local club or starting one of your own, you can check out our information pages at broadview.org/reading clubs. Following, we're going to stay around, I've already said that, and the next reading club event is going to be April 4th at 7 p.m. and we'll discuss the April-May issue at that time. So good night to those who are leaving, and I'm going to stick around for a bit for those who want to stay.
Jocelyn, I can only stay for about another 8 or 9 minutes because I was booked for something before you let me know about this. But
Sure, yeah.
Also late, so.
No problem at all. No problem at all. If anybody has any other, Carmen, I'm wondering if, you deal with so much with, the things in the downtown east side, the opioid crisis, people who have dealt with trauma in their lives. How do you take care of your own self? What are your own practices?
That's a good question. I feel like I came to this role with a lot of resilience. I struggled with drugs and alcohol myself when I was much younger, and so came into this role with like 16 years of sobriety. And so I had already worked really hard at developing a lot of tools dealing with my own history and trauma triggers. And it hasn't been easy. Martha Piper and Indira Samaskara just wrote this great book called Nerve, which is about women's leadership. And they both talk about like spend whatever disposable income you have. If you're a woman leader, you should spend whatever disposable income you have on all the help you need. And so part of it was having really great au pairs when my kids were younger, and knowing that my kids were having an amazing experience and not like holding on to the guilt of like having to be really focused at work, especially when I first joined First United and we'd sort of been in decline for a while and needed to turn things around. It's been learning not to overwork and to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and just saying enough some nights and leaving my computer at my desk and getting home to read with my kids or play Lego, or I try to take like an ED offsite day once a month. And so we're really lucky in Vancouver, we're close to Whistler, and so there's a place called Scandinav where they have like outdoor hot tubs and steam rooms, and but it's silent inside. Like once you leave the main hall and you go out to like do these like hot cold tub things, you're not allowed to speak. So I don't take a day off, but I pay for it myself, and then I will take a book, whatever book I'm trying to read for work, or if there's a particularly like gnarly issue I'm trying to work through, I'll take my journal and whatever I'm reading, and I will take a day completely unplugged from my computer or my phone, and just have time for my own like meditation and reflection, but also in a way that I'm like detoxifying my body. I do hot yoga, but I only do restorative yoga. So a lot of like evening classes of like letting go of stress.
That's great.
I read a lot.
Yeah. I think Herbie could relate to that with his running.
Oh, I used to run and I miss running. I just broke a toe a few weeks ago, and so I was just getting back into walking and doing some walk run training, and I gotta take it easy for a little bit.
All right, Carmen, next time I'm in Vancouver, we're gonna go for a jog together, all right?
Yeah, I'm down.
Sounds good.
Yeah, if anybody wants to jump in, you don't have to raise your hand or put things in the chat. Just jump in. It's informal chat time.
Okay, it's Mary Margaret here. I have a question. I had posted it just before we ended about. I recently was reading an article from written by an Inuit woman, and one of her complaints was that we have a tendency to kind of put all Indigenous people together as though you were all the same. And if you've ever had an opportunity to study or learn or be involved, you know that they're not. I grew up next to an Iroquois reserve. I know it's very different from where I live now, which is Mississauga, Anishinaabe, and the Inuit again are different. And she pointed out that they were in what happened was they brought a smudging ceremony, which is not common for them to do. Do you see in your role about helping educate people about the differences as well? That is an important thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it's an important part. I think people have become really good, especially with the move towards doing territorial acknowledgements, to like learn where they are or where they're visiting. But you know, there are very different traditions and ceremonies across the country, and even more so when you get west of the Rockies. Like, we have the most cultural and linguistic diversity sort of north of Guatemala for all of the Americas. And so we have 27 different language families in British Columbia. And some of them are, it's actually really interesting. I think if you start in Alaska and you go down the coast, like you can say, you know, the sky is blue in Alaska. And as you go down through all of the different language groups, you know, one community to the next, they can say the same thing and translate it correctly until you get all the way down to the Olympic Peninsula. But if the person in Alaska and the person in the Olympic Peninsula tried to speak to each other, they'd be like completely different languages. So you can sort of see the evolution of language here. But again, like we don't have, well, we had different versions of smudging, not what's commonly done, especially in the prairies in British Columbia. I've had the church, actually, there was one situation where the planning committee for a BC conference, so this is before the restructuring of the church, they asked me, should we offer tobacco to the Musqueam elder who is coming to do a traditional welcoming? And I said, I wouldn't, like, that's not, like, we didn't grow tobacco here. That's not something that's common in our culture. And if, you know, I think you should ask the Musqueam elders, like, what's the proper way to acknowledge the gift that she's giving by coming to do the opening welcome. And they said, well, can you check? And so I checked and I said, well, you know, she put a blanket or a towel over her with money pinned to it. And they said, well, what if we offered her some like smoked salmon? And I was like, she's a fisherman's daughter. Like, don't give her store-bought smoked salmon. That's not a good idea. And so they hadn't asked specifically about the tobacco. And then I went to the opening of the BC conference, and like the first thing they did was offer her tobacco. And I'm like texting somebody who's on my board who's Musqueam, and I was like, oh my God, you guys give tobacco in your culture? And he's like, no, what's going on? I said, well, they're giving this elder tobacco. And he's like, oh my gosh, is she being generous and gracious about it? I said, yes, of course she is. You know, so I think that like that particular instance was frustrating for me because they had already reached out and asked what they should do. I had used my networks to ask specifically about the nation where they were meeting, and then they still didn't do what I asked. Or they still did, you know, they asked me for advice and didn't do what I suggested. So it is important to learn about the diversity of the places where you're from, and to realize that you're going to hear a diversity of opinions and experiences and histories, even within an individual community. And part of that is because our societies weren't like homogeneous to start with. And we have a real variety of legacies of brokenness from residential schools, right? Like we were actively and legally prevented from practicing our culture for generations. And so I think it's always important just to check in with the person that you're talking to and ask them about their own experience of their culture and, you know, how to incorporate or make space for that in a good way.
Thank you.
I know Herbie has to leave in a couple of minutes and Carmen has to leave in a couple of minutes. So if there's any other questions for Herbie or Carmen, we should grab those in. Carol, were you raising your hand or?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Carmen. I hope we hear a lot more from you as a United Church person. I'm also very interested in urban, Indigenous people in the urban centers, because from my understanding, that's the larger numbers of people as opposed to people who are living on reserves or in their own specific communities, which means a lot of people are coming from many different communities and many different traditions in urban centers. And I know I'm more familiar within the Ottawa region and so on. But anyway, I won't take up your time because I know both of you have to leave. I just wanted to thank you profoundly, and I really hope that you can come to the East Coast to visit us and come to Ottawa to visit us. That's where my two communities are. Thank you.
Jocelyn, I just wanted to ask a question, if I could, about the artwork in this
Yeah.
the one that was featured, the trees, and I didn't see it until you guys started to speak. This is actually two hands. The roots are actually two hands holding hands, and I just thought, wow, it's beautiful. Can you speak for a minute about the background, how this artwork came to be in the magazine?
You know, it's actually just it's a stock image that we found and thought our art director found and thought was absolutely perfect to illustrate this. So we didn't commission it, but it was really, really good.
No, Jocelyn, this is the opportunity where you say, no, I actually took a whole evening and I drew this myself.
Yeah,
I slaved over this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was all me.
That is amazing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Stock image.
Yeah, it was a stock image, sorry, but an artist did it. I don't know the background.
What a letdown, eh, Hazel?
Yeah,
Hey.
sorry.
There'll be some stock artist out there who would have been thrilled to know, but anyway, thank you.
Well, I think they do find out, but yeah, how it's used.
All right, everybody, I got to be up at 4:30 in the morning.
Me
so I'm gonna
again. I
sign
have a
off
question
now.
for John.
Okay, thank you, Herbie. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Take care.
Take
Thanks
care.
again for
Yeah,
coming.
there are
Sharon
not
and
two
Jocelyn,
4:30s
thank
in
you.
a day. It's only one and it comes after lunch. I have a question for John about where to get seedlings, and also want to say I have been to Abbey North for a couple of retreats and they were absolutely fabulous. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. We actually are fortunate to have some acreage, and I like this idea of planting trees. I planted red oaks last year from acorns, and they sprouted. So I'm hoping they'll keep going, but I'm wondering where is a good source to get seedlings for trees. I live in the Kawartha Lakes area.
I'm not sure if John is still with us, actually. I think he
Oh,
might
is
have
he not?
signed off.
Oh, shoot. Well, I guess that means
Well,
all of our
I'll
guests have
look
gone. Yeah. We'll
All
we'll
right,
email
this
them
is
your
really a great, I love the reading club. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, Mary Margaret. It's great to see you and to see everybody. Thank you again for coming. I guess our guests have gone, so we should wrap it up for the night, but wonderful to see so many people here tonight. And I'll see, well, Emma will lead the next one and then I'll do the one after that, but it's been a really lovely evening. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I wish we had more time. We could use more time. Good night. Take care.